10 of the questions you answer on this exam don't count. Not one of them is labeled. You will sit down expecting 75 questions, and 85 will appear, and FINRA will never tell you which 10 were the free ones. And there's a specific way that fact quietly changes how you should spend your last 20 minutes in that room, which almost nobody plans for. Last time we covered what the SIE is and who can sit it. Today is the scoring, because a lot of people study for a year and still walk in with the wrong mental model of what they're being measured on.
Erica here, and I want to start with that 85 number because it's in FINRA's own content outline and most study guides never mention it.
Michael here. The line reads that each candidate's exam consists of a total of 85 items, 75 scored, 10 unscored.
Those 10 are called pretest items. They're questions FINRA is trying out for future exams, and they need real candidates under real conditions to find out whether a question is any good before it counts against anybody.
And they're randomly distributed through the exam, not clustered at the end where you could ignore them. Scattered.
Which means the strategy some people reach for straight away, hunting for the throwaway questions, isn't a strategy at all. It's a way to lose time on 85 questions instead of 75.
And an odd-looking question isn't evidence. A pretest item can look perfectly ordinary, and a scored item can look strange. There's no tell.
So treat all 85 as real. That's the only rational play, and it's the one FINRA effectively designed for.
The part that actually bites is the clock. 1 hour and 45 minutes, and the clock doesn't know that 10 of your questions are practice.
So people build a pacing plan around 75 and run out of road. We will do that arithmetic properly later, and it's not close to what most people assume.
Michael has been arguing the uncomfortable version of this all week, so let him put it.
Happily. If 10 questions are secretly practice, why should anyone trust the score at all?
That's exactly the right question, and the answer is genuinely interesting. 85 items, 10 of them invisible, 1 hour 45 on the clock. Before we keep going, one small favor that actually moves the needle. If this is landing for you, tap like, then subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the rest. 2 taps, completely free, and it pushes this in front of more people who need it. Michael asked why you should trust a score when 10 questions were secretly practice. The answer is that those 10 are the reason the other 75 can be trusted at all.
Which is genuinely counterintuitive, so it's worth someone taking apart properly.
Professor Havel studies how tests get built, and flagged this exact line in the outline before we started, so he should take it.
The line you flagged is the one about a common scale, and it's doing more work than it looks like. A pretest item isn't testing the candidate, it's testing the question. FINRA puts it in front of thousands of real candidates and watches how it behaves.
Watches how it behaves, meaning what, specifically?
Whether strong candidates get it right more often than weak ones. If a question is ambiguous, or badly worded, or accidentally has 2 defensible answers, the data shows it immediately. Strong candidates start missing it at the same rate as everyone else.
So a bad question gets caught before it can ever cost anyone a pass.
Before it counts against a single person. And the alternative is worse than most people imagine. Without pretesting, every new question goes live untested, and the first cohort to see it absorbs the error.
And the second half of that sentence in the outline is the statistical adjustment.
That's the other half of the fairness problem. 2 candidates don't get identical exams. If yours happened to be slightly harder, a raw count would punish you for the draw. So all scores are placed on a common scale, and that adjustment absorbs the difference in difficulty.
So the scale can move, but the standard doesn't.
Precisely that. The outline says it plainly. Every candidate is held to the same passing standard regardless of which set of items they received. What moves is the arithmetic, never the bar.
And there's one practical instruction that falls straight out of all of this, which is in the outline in as many words.
There's no penalty for guessing. FINRA says so directly and then says candidates should attempt to answer all items.
Which follows from everything above. A blank is a guaranteed 0 on that item. A guess among 4 choices isn't. Leaving anything unanswered on this exam is simply throwing away expected value.
So the honest counter to my own question is that the 10 hidden items are the quality control, not the trick.
Professor Havel, that's the clearest version of it I've heard. The 10 you can't see are what make the 75 you can trust.
Michael did the hard part by refusing to accept it on faith. Keep doing that with everything on this exam.
"70. That's the number you have to hit, and it's the single most misunderstood figure on this whole exam.
Because 70 looks like a percentage, and people immediately do the arithmetic. 70% of 75 is 52.5. So 53 right answers, and I'm through.
Which is the calculation almost everyone makes, and it's not what the number means.
Remember what Professor Havel just explained. Scores are placed on a common scale. So 70 is a point on that scale, not a raw count of correct answers.
The practical consequence is that nobody can tell you exactly how many questions you need. Not us, not a study guide, not a forum post. The raw number that produces a 70 shifts with the difficulty of the set you drew.
Which sounds evasive until you remember why. If the count were fixed, the person who drew the harder exam would be punished for the draw. There's one more thing the scaled score quietly protects, and it's worth naming because it cuts the other way. Nobody who passed got an easier bar than you did. The adjustment works in both directions. If a set of items turned out to be unusually gentle, the scale tightens rather than handing out a cheap pass. So the credential you end up holding means the same thing as everyone else who holds it, which is the entire point of a qualification.
So here's how to actually use the 70, and it's a different habit from chasing a raw count.
Aim comfortably above it in practice. If your mock exams are landing at 71, you're not ready because you're one unlucky draw from being under. If they're landing at 80 plus consistently across full-length mocks, then the difficulty of any particular set stops mattering.
That's the whole point of a margin. It absorbs the variance you can't control.
And there's a second reason for the margin that people underestimate. Practice conditions are kinder than the real room. You're at home, no clock pressure, and you've seen some of those questions before.
Almost everyone scores a few points lower in the testing center than at their kitchen table. Building the margin means that drop lands you at a comfortable pass rather than a narrow fail.
So the honest version is that 70 is the floor and 80 is the target, and the difference between them isn't perfectionism, it's insurance.
Well put. And there's one more constraint on the day that turns all of this from theory into a plan, which is the clock.
"1 hour and 45 minutes. Written out as minutes, that's 105, and this is where the 85 number stops being a curiosity and starts costing people passes.
Because the pacing plan almost everyone builds uses the wrong denominator.
Professor Havel is still with us, and this is squarely his territory.
And the arithmetic is worth doing out loud rather than nodding at. 105 minutes is 6,300 seconds. Divide by 85 items and you get roughly 74 seconds per item.
And if you plan against 75 instead,
you get 84 seconds, and you believe you've 10 seconds more per question than you do. Over an exam that's a deficit of about 14 minutes, arriving all at once at the end.
Which is exactly the failure people describe afterwards. They were fine, comfortable, and then suddenly there were 20 questions left and no time.
And it's not a knowledge failure at that point. It's an arithmetic failure made weeks earlier, at home, with a calculator.
There's a second constraint stacked on top, and it's in the outline too. No reference materials. Nothing comes in with you.
So no formula sheet for the bond maths, no settlement cheat card.
Nothing. Which means the recall has to be fast as well as correct, and slow recall spends the 74 seconds you don't have. A fact you can only reach after 15 seconds of thinking is functionally a different fact from one you know instantly.
So what does a workable pacing plan actually look like? And there's a version of this that people get backwards, which is worth saying plainly. Working faster isn't the fix. Rushing an item you actually know is how you turn a correct answer into a careless one, and a careless wrong answer costs exactly as much as a knowledge gap. The time you need comes from not lingering on the questions you've already answered in your head, not from hurrying the ones you haven't.
Bank time early and spend it late. The early items in any section tend to be definitional, and those are the ones you can answer in 20 seconds. Don't linger to feel clever about them. Every second you save on an easy item is a second available for the calculation later.
And flag rather than fight. If a question isn't yielding in about 90 seconds, mark it, answer it anyway because there's no guessing penalty, and move.
The answer it anyway part is the bit people skip. They flag it and leave it blank, intending to come back and then run out of clock.
And a blank at the buzzer is a certain zero, where a guess was never worse than that. Put something down every single time you move on.
Professor Havel, thank you. 74 seconds, not 84, is the number I'd want people to leave with.
Michael can keep the credit for making me show the arithmetic instead of asserting it. Do the division yourself, everyone. It's the cheapest 10 minutes of preparation available.
So let's turn all of that into a number you can actually aim at, because a scoring episode that ends in theory has not done its job.
Start with the target rather than the floor, 80 or better, on full-length timed mocks, repeated. Not one good afternoon, a pattern.
And full length matters as much as the score does. A 20-question quiz tells you almost nothing about hour 2, and hour 2 is where people lose this exam.
Then weight your study the way the exam is weighted, which we walked through last time. Products and their risks is 33 of your 75 scored items on its own.
Trading, customer accounts, and prohibited activities is another 23. Those two sections are 56 of 75 between them.
Capital markets is 12 and regulatory framework is 7, which doesn't mean ignore them. 7 questions is wider than a lot of people pass by.
And this is where the honest caveat belongs, because we're recommending a weighted study plan and there's a real argument against it.
If you weight hard towards Section 2 and your weakness happens to sit in Section 4, you can drill your strongest area and walk in with the same gap you started with.
Which is a fair hit. So the rule is weight your study by the exam, then override it with your own mock data. The weights tell you where to start. Your wrong answers tell you where to stay.
For most people starting from 0, the weights are the better guide. For anyone with 3 or 4 full mocks behind them, their own error log wins.
Then time every mock at 105 minutes for 85 items, so the pacing is trained rather than discovered on the day.
And never leave an item blank, ever. Though I go say and love guessing, make it po ariasing simone yosekis erbi aimir.
Next time we start Section 1 properly with the SEC and the self-regulatory organizations, and who actually has authority over what.
If one thing survives today, make it the 85. You answer 85 items in 105 minutes, 70 of the scale is the bar, and 10 of your questions are quietly auditioning for a future exam.
And a blank helps nobody, least of all you.
If you're working toward this exam, subscribing keeps the rest of the course arriving in order, and there are free timed practice sets on the site to run these numbers against. So before you go, tell me, when you sat a big exam, did you run out of time or run out of certainty? Go and do the division yourself. This is Liam, and I will see you in episode 10.